Everyone, welcome. This is Beyond Delay. My name is Mark, and we are going to do a Tottenham Hotspur transfer update. 6 days left in the window, so not an awful lot of time to get deals done. And as usual, we are getting linked with every player under the sun. So let's get a look at these. We'll have a chat about them, see the likelihood, what we think is going to happen with those, and we'll move on to the next one, and then we'll summarise at the end. So first up, the big one that's came out over yesterday into today is Piero Hincapie, the Bayern Leverkusen left back, closing his contract, £52 million. We, depending on what source you're looking at, Fabrizio Romano has said we have put in an offer of a loan for the year with an obligation to buy in 2026, and that it is under consideration by Leverkusen. However, we've had Ali Gold come out today saying that the club has no interest in the player and have not submitted any kind of bid for him. And on top of that, we've then got David Ornstein coming out and saying that Arsenal are actually interested in the player and are looking to sign him. However, it all depends on movement of players going out of the club. So again, it's another one of these stories where we've got three sets of people supposedly in the know coming out and saying different things. I think this transfer window, I think Fabrizio Romano's probably gotten as many deals wrong as he has gotten right. So he seems to be slipping certainly this season in terms of things that he's putting out there. Normally when you're seeing that, here we go, it's a done deal, whereas we've already seen ourselves that there's been a number of these went out in our instance that just have not been the case. So a fantastic player, left back, could also slip into that left centre back position, is a fantastic player. We have been linked with him on and off for probably the last 3 seasons. Very good player, Ecuadorian international, fit as anything, fantastic player at the back, but it looks like we really don't hold any interest in him. And to be fair, out of the three names being mentioned, Ali Gold's the one that I'd be sticking with, as he does seem to know an awful lot about what's going on behind the scenes at the club. And even David Ornstein's quite good as well. And if he's saying that we've no interest in Arsenal loans are actually putting that deal out there, then it's more likely that that's the case. So would it have been good to sign it? Because we do need a centre back and backup. But I think in terms of what we need for the club, which is we're looking for a winger, we're looking for a number 10, and we're looking for a centre back. Centre back is third on that list because we do have a number of options. It just becomes a bit sketchy if we start to play three at the back and we end up facing an injury crisis. We could really struggle to fill those roles. So that's the defensive ones out the way. There's not really any other links being made to any other players. So let's go and look at the attacking options that are being presented as Spurs being interested in them. So first up, as we have known for quite a while, is Savinho. Apparently the stance by Manchester City is softening in that, and it is being suggested that they are wanting to find a replacement for the player before agreeing anything. Apparently we are quite close to agreeing the fee that City are looking for. We're looking to put in a bit of around 61 million for the player, which isn't too far off the 70 million that Man City were supposedly quoted as saying that they wanted for the player. So in terms of that, and that's 70 million euros, not 70 million pounds, it's pretty close to it. So we may see this deal getting done before the window. Still an iffy one, I think, but I think it's the one that all fans right now are focusing on, saying this is the guy that we want the club to sign. We need to make it happen. 6 days left in this transfer window, so we are not leaving ourselves an awful lot of time. I think at the end of this one as well, we'll have a quick conversation around the Johan Lange time frames and what he's been doing and where he's been at, because I think it's playing an important role in terms of what we're missing out on. But we'll talk about that a wee bit later on. So in terms of Savinho, it looks like a deal might get done. But at the moment, the way Levy has been doing these things, I would not hold my breath on it until I see the man in a Spurs shirt. So after that, we are then looking at Nico Paz at Como. The player initially was being said to be interested in a move to Spurs. However, some of the information that's came out over the last day or two seems to suggest otherwise. We put in another bid for the player, quite close to the valuation of what the club is looking for him. However, there's a number of factors in a deal like that being done, is that Madrid hold a 50% sell-on clause fee, so they're going to scalp half of that from Como. Also, they have the option to buy back the player for £10 million. So if there's any kind of interest there, they'll get the first option and we'll get him at a far, far lower reduced fee and rate. And if he moves to another club, then they lose that interest in controlling stake in the player and being able to brought back. Certainly, what it seems to be in the media is that he's all in name but a Real Madrid player. And certainly, the player seems to be saying that he wants to stay at Como with the eventual return to Real Madrid in another season or two's time. So in terms of that one being done, I think that deal is dead in the water. I think regardless of whether or not Como accepts something, I don't think that the player will actually accept and agree to a transfer to Spurs. So I think that was dead in the water. And if we keep making silly bids on players that we know are not going to come to us, then all we're doing is wasting negotiation time with players who actually do. So in from what I'm saying, and certainly in my own mind, I think the Nico Paz deal, although it would have been a very good option and a good player to get in the door, I don't think that one's actually going to happen at all. So if that ends up coming off, it'll be a big surprise. But certainly, all of the markers seem to be that that deal is off the table and is not going to go anywhere. Another one that has surprisingly popped up in over the last day or two, and it's kind of surprising because some of the sort of support bases have kind of been going in a wee bit hard on the West Ham fans, and certainly one of the things that's been kind of mentioned is going in and putting a bid in for Lucas Paqueta, the Brazilian 27-year-old attacking midfielder, and it looks as if we may actually hold an interest in that player. Personally, if we want to put some money in, it would be in my favour. I'd love to see them go for Jared Bowen. However, he is West Ham through and through, so I think the odds of him leaving are going to be exceptionally low and probably not to us. But it would have been a good idea for me, a nice wee dream transfer because he is a phenomenal player and he's absolutely wasted at West Ham in terms of skill and ability. However, I will not knock the guy for the loyalty and sticking around at the club when he could have left in previous seasons. So I don't think it's one that would ever happen. Paqueta, however, is a very good, interesting attacking midfield player when he is fit and well and playing consistently. I've watched him on a number of occasions, and I think he is a solid player, highly experienced in the Premier League as well, and actually would bring a little bit of bite into our midfield going forward as well. So, not entirely unenamored with a move for him. I think it would be good business if we can get him for a fair value. However, the other side of the scales on this one is that West Ham have already done business with us, and we do not get on well selling or buying from West Ham to Spurs or vice versa. So it's an interesting prospect that we would go back and take a second player from them, especially another attacking one when you consider how poorly they've played under Potter in the last two games. Losing another attacking outlet for them would probably send their fans into meltdown. So it really, from their perspective, wouldn't be a good move. And I think if the board did something like that, then they'd have an absolute riot on their hands. However, certainly from our point of view, I like the player and I think he would definitely be a very good attacking option. Certainly in the meantime, for the next couple of months, while Kulu comes back into training, gets his fitness up and the rehabilitation moving on, he would definitely be a good option. I think if we could get him for around 30, 40 million, then I think it would be a really good deal. But I imagine West Ham would probably want 50 plus for him. But again, I think it's a decent option. The big one, I think, out of all the names that were kind of being mentioned for as a secondary option, certainly if Savinho was that number one target, is Magnus Akaluche. I think he's a very good player. His stats last season actually showed how much he contributes to the team. Again, it's making that move from the French league into the Premiership. But again, the boy has the talent. He's very good off the ball. He's very good on the ball, looking around, playing people in, making those runs as well. And and the stats last season were very, very good in terms of assists and goals as well. So it would go a long way to filling in that 60 goal gap that we've got at the moment with Son having left, Kulu injured, and Madison being injured as well. So a good option. I think the fee they were talking around for him was about 47.5 million, which isn't unreasonable. 23-year-old international, I believe. So, in terms of the stats of what he did last season, if he could do something very similar, if he was to come to Spurs, then I think this 47.5 million very well spent. I can't remember. I'd need to check back on some of the other videos that I've done. I think there might be a £52 million release clause on his contract. So again, it's something that's worth exploring. And I think, young age, he's experienced as well. So the value, I think, is quite right for what we'd see Spurs wanting to spend on a player. And as I say, he's played a lot of games. He's contributed a lot of goals and assists, and would certainly help fill that void. So yeah, something I would like to see to get done, but I don't know if we've even registered any interest or even if we've tested the water by putting any bids in. But certainly one that we are almost every day now for the last wee while being quite closely linked to a move for him. However, there are other Premiership teams that are supposedly looking at him as well. So if we do make the move, we could be up for a battle to sign him. So those were kind of the main names that we have been linked to. There are a few other ones that are still kind of skirting around the edges of the rumour mill. So we'll have a wee look at them, and I think we may end up seeing one or two of these coming to the club instead of the ones we're actually looking at. So let's have a quick look at them. So first up is Mikkel Damsgaard from Brentford, well-known attacking number 10 entity for Thomas Frank, one he's well known to and would slip right into the system with very little acclimatization to the Spurs squad or the way that Frank wants us to play as a team. So this, in terms of making the signing, it certainly makes sense. It's a player he knows very well. It's a player some of his coaching staff know exceptionally well as well, and is actually a bloody good player as well. So would definitely enhance the squad and would certainly enhance the starting 11 from a number 10 perspective too. So making him a signing would be a good option if that was one of the ones that kind of came off as a periphery signing, one that we haven't been heavily linked with, but it's been mentioned. The problem I see with that is I don't see Brentford letting any more players go other than Vissa. He's a mainstay in their team as well, so they're going to want big money for him. You're probably looking at somewhere in the region of around 60 million at least for him. So whether that one comes off or not, I don't know, but I certainly wouldn't turn my nose down at it either. I think it would be a good signing for us to make, given the fact that we've wasted a lot of time trying to bring in number 10s elsewhere that really were never going to be prospects for coming. Harvey Elliott is another player that we have been linked to in the past quite heavily to begin with, and then it kind of teetered off. In more recent times, he's been linked with a move abroad, but it just doesn't seem to have worked out or came to fruition. He is a good young English player. I think at Liverpool, he's shown spells where his talent is shining through, but he's not quite the completed article. Is it the kind of player I could see coming to Spurs? Yes, I do. But I think that signing would split the fan base. I think it's probably pretty much down the middle. Someone that thinks he'd be a good signing, certainly a good squad player. He has a lot of potential. I think he's got a good ceiling in terms of where he could get to as a player. I just don't think we've seen enough of it at Liverpool to say yes or no to it. Another question would be, how well would he fit into the Thomas Frank systems? And as we've seen in the first three games of the season, we've played three different formations and actually played them very, very effectively, certainly against Man City and Burnley, but even for the first 85 minutes against PSG, where we've played these different formations. And certainly if the objective of the board is that we must compete on all fronts. So that's 4 games. And if you progress exceptionally well through those competitions, you're looking at around 60 games for the season. So you definitely need a strong squad, and it's not something that we have right now. In terms of the player, if we're looking at other options, I wouldn't want him to be signed for the club. And I don't mean that in any kind of disrespect. I do think he's a very good player. I just think that there's other options out there I would rather see this club make than come in with this one. However, he does tick the box in terms of what I would expect from a Levy signing with 6 days off the transfer window left. And to be honest, I wouldn't be objective to the fact that he was to come into the club. If we did sign him, I think he would be a good squad player, and he could fill a gap now until Kulu comes back. But it's the kind of player I see them in because it's an alternative to what we've been looking at, and we could get him for a lot less money than what we would spend elsewhere. So, do I want to see it happen? Not really. I'd rather get some. There's other players out there I'd rather see come into the club. But I could see it happen simply from a cost-effective value as well. And the player, I think, would be quite willing to move to Spurs too. So it's an interesting one, and it's probably one you might end up seeing done just because of the value. And if we are really struggling to make those signings come in to enhance that squad. Bilal El Kounas from Leicester, the 21-year-old Moroccan, is being linked on and off with a move to Spurs. More recently, Crystal Palace have been looking at him as an option in as a moving on to Arsenal. Um, could be bought for around £30 million. He again is another really good young attacking talent with I think a very high threshold in terms of what he could do over the course of his career. I would like to see Spurs sign him, certainly if we can get him at that value, but I wouldn't want it to be a signing instead of a main number 10 or an attacking option, because I think there's a lot of development that he still needs to go through to make him the player he needs to be. I think if we could get into attacking players and bring him in alongside that and do very similar to what we need to do with Odebear and Tail, which is just give him the time to develop in the team, into the squad, and in potentially next season we could see him as a player that could really come into his own, very much like what Matasar is doing right now at Spurs. He's had a couple of seasons of being in and out of the team, being given the opportunity to develop, and then all of a sudden he's an absolute baller, and he's only 22. So if we were able to do something like that, and Thomas Frank is the kind of guy that can get young players and develop them and turn them into more than what they actually are, I think that would be good. Again, very similar to Harvey Elliott, I think it's a deal that we could see Daniel Levy doing in such a short space time because it's very low value, and he's probably more likely to throw money at it to get the deal done, to bulk out the squad and to slightly appease the fans and getting deals done. But again, he's not really a player for right now. In my mind, he's a player for the future. Again, I would like to see us sign him, but he's definitely not one I want to see come through the door if he is the main attacking signing that we're going to make before the end of the transfer window. Dibbling was a midfield target that we had been looking at, and I've mentioned him in previous videos as well. Very young player. Stats wise, terrible last season. Not what you're wanting to see from an attacking player in terms of goals and assists. I think all he did was score 2 goals, no assists. So not really what we're looking at. And I don't mean it in a bad way that the stats are terrible, because in terms of what we're looking at and what we're needing to replace in the team, as I say, between the three players, the ones that are left and injured, 60 goal contributions in total, we're looking at someone that can provide at least 20 in a season or more. And the young lad just won't be able to do that at Spurs. He's a cracking player again with a high threshold. If we were to bring him in, very similar as I mentioned for El Kunas, then give him the time to develop into the area, I think that would be more likely. However, the news out today is that Everton have put forward a £42 million package that Southampton look likely to accept, and he will then become an Everton player. So I think, as good as this signing it would be for the future, it's one that'll never come off. I think that's a done deal for Everton, and probably a very good one for the future. I think you'll probably see him maybe get some game time this season, but not as much as what he did when he was at Southampton, which is a shame, because I think he's definitely a good player that will develop and increase it and get better. But the money that they were initially looking for that player, I think, was 120 million. And then you put it in the fact that, well, you relegated team, so you're almost half in that cost, and then you're looking at the age, what he's actually done, and you're probably looking in and around at that 30-40 million mark, which is what it looks like Everton are going to agree for. So another player we've been linked to, but actually we've been beaten to the punch by somebody else. But again, when you're looking at the experience and what we need right now, it's not a signing for this season. But he may go to Everton and develop and maybe be somebody that we look at again in the future in a couple of seasons' time. Ademola Lookman is another player that we were linked to a number of weeks ago, but it never really came to anything. His time in Italy definitely looks to be done. I think he's driven the nail into that coffin himself and is certainly pushing for a move away. Now, he has been rumoured to have been offered to a number of Premiership clubs, but nobody has taken a look or even a sniff at buying him. So I think in terms of him, it is just one of those ones that we've been linked to him because I think every Premier League team has pretty much been linked to a move for this guy. Numbers last season were pretty good. A couple of really big, memorable goals that he contributed to that made him look really good. I'm not sure about him about whether he comes to the Premiership, he's going to be able to deliver the same. And the worry for me as a supporter would be if we're seeing this type of behaviour from him now at that club, is it something we're going to get further down the line if things don't start going his way? And we're then having to deal with a player of a temperament that is basically dealing with a child. And nobody wants another Isaac at their club. So, I think good talented player probably would do the business for us, but I think he brings a lot of baggage and could be trouble down the line. So I would rather not see him at the club. Certainly, if you think otherwise, chuck something into the comments. Let me know what your thoughts are on him. But I certainly wouldn't want to see him at Spurs. Vissa at Brentford again has been left out. Keith Andrews, I think, was saying today that he would expect him at some point, if he doesn't move, to come back into the squad. Again, a very good player, can play up front, can also play effectively on the wing too. So would definitely kind of tick the boxes in terms of the contribution he can make and could be played in a number of areas, which again, under Thomas Frank, is something he's really keen on bringing players in that can have utility across a number of spaces in the squad. 40 million, I think, is what we're looking at there. Brentford are supposedly pushing for 60, given the fact that he's a 29-year-old centre forward. He's going to be coming 30 very soon. And then by the end of the season, you're looking at someone's going to be 31. So 60 million for him is probably way wide of the mark. However, it does look like Newcastle's likely to be his destination rather than probably us if we were to come in for him. However, there's always that Thomas Frank connection. And again, the attitude bit is something that would worry me, that we could end up seeing the same thing happen further down the line. However, player come towards the end of his career, you probably wouldn't see it towards the end of that. I just think he's got an opportunity right now in this time of his career to make a big move, and it's just not come off for him. But again, Brentford have sold a lot of big players out of their first 11. Do they really want to let another one go? This one they might, as long as they get the money they want for him. Very good player, would definitely enhance what we've got, would definitely give us that attacking option in the centre midfield role, centre forward role, but could also play it on the left too. So it kind of ticks two of those boxes. Would definitely be the kind of thing that Daniel Levy, I think, would be up for. Certainly, if we are going to be playing across 4 competitions, with Slanky and Richie being our only centre forward options, having a third one in there as well would be very good. Again, Richie has that utility to play out on the left too, so even having the both of them being able to cover those 2 spaces enhances a bit more competition left-hand side, takes the pressure a little bit off Odegaard and Tail, and gives us a bit more attacking strength. And again, a player that Thomas Frank and some of his coaching staff are very, very aware of. So it ticks a lot of boxes. I think if we get a deal done quite right, then I think we'll get it. But I think his heart's set on a move to Newcastle. So the odds of this one happening is probably very slim, but would be a signing I would like us to make if we can get the money right. Morgan Rogers is the final one we're going to have a chat about in terms of players being linked to the club. Again, very good stats, brilliantly played. Morgan Rogers at Aston Villa is another one we have been linked with more recently, looking at potentially a bid of around 18 million to secure him. As I said in my previous video on what number 10 options do we have out there, certainly for me, if we don't get Savinho, then I think this is our number one target we've got to go for. Some back and forth in the media in terms of ITK saying we have been interested in him, we're not interested in him. I think the situation with Aston Villa and PSR is an interesting one. I know they got the 40 million for Ramsey, another player who we were previously interested in, but I think going in and slap 80 million down bid on would certainly make them think twice in terms of, do we try and keep the player or do we let him go? In my mind, his statistical contribution for goals and assists last season for Villa was top notch, probably one of the best in the Prem, out with the kind of top 4 teams. and would be a signing I would very much like to see at the club. Certainly gives us that attacking impetus, and a player just sort of approaching into his prime. So there's a hell of a lot more to come from the player. Villa haven't played so good at the start of the season, but it's only 2 games, so I'm not overly judgy in terms of players and what they're contributing, because you tend to find the results are based on how the entire squad or how the team are playing and things like that there. So very good, solid player, consistent in the Premier League with Aston Villa, and it would be a brilliant signing for us. But again, it's one of those ones of whether we actually are interested or whether we're not, and we certainly haven't made any formal bids. Although we have supposedly made a few inquiries with the players' team in the background, so we'll wait and see whether anything comes off. But the problem we have, and we'll kind of move into that discussion now, is there are 6 days left in the transfer window. So trying to get 2 or 3 player deals done and over the line now with 6 days to go is really leaving it tight. And I know Daniel Levy has a habit of announcing players on deadline day, but also at the same time, we've also seen a number of deadline days come and go with absolutely nothing being made. I think, we can't make these massive statements in terms of, seeing the chairman sit there and go, I want to win the league. I want to win the FA Cup. I want to win the League Cup. I want to win the Champions League. That's a massive, massive statement. You cannot then go out, change your manager because of not performing on all fronts, bring in a manager and tell them that's what you need to do, but not support them in the transfer market. In terms of financials, we are looking very, very good. We could easily spend 200, 250 million and still be sitting quite comfortably in terms of where we sit with PSR. So we can go out there, we can spend big, and we can bring in the players that Thomas Frank needs. He has identified the requirement for a winger. He has identified the requirement for a number 10 and a centre back, preferably one that can play on the left hand side. So we've got a manager who has said, I need at least 3 players that will kick this team on, will give me the ability to change through my formations, play different players, rotate them out, making sure that they're fully rested, and barring any injuries, being able to compete on all fronts until we get the number of players who we have that are currently out injured coming back into that squad and then enhancing it again. The last thing I want to do is see no players coming in or players that just are not going to hit the mark, and we've went out and bought them as a cheaper alternative to who we should have been going for, which is what we've seen in probably good 5-10 seasons past. So, if we're going to make those big signings, support the manager. The weirdest thing for me in this transfer window was hearing that Langer was on holiday last week. It's like, it's absolute madness. I know in the job that I do and the work that I get paid for, that there are certain periods of the year that you just do not go on holiday because it's the busiest times in what you do for a job. And I'm sure that there are people out here who will be watching this video will be exactly the same. So why on earth, when we are looking at the transfer window for the club, certainly with 2 weeks left in it, that he's away on holiday for a week? And in that week, we haven't signed Eze. He's went to Arsenal. And I know there's circumstances around that. They already knew what Palace wanted because they put the bid in a week before we were even entertaining it. So they knew the value. They had an injury, came in, offered what they wanted. Do you still want it? Yes, we do. There you go. There's your money. Enhanced terms for Eze. Off he goes. He's an Arsenal supporter. That's what you're going to do. And you would expect that if we were going up against Arsenal and the player that we were going at was a Spurs supporter, you know that they're going to choose us over them. It's just a simple fact. And it isn't quite that we were gazumped as a lot of us being put out there or hijacked. They knew what the club wanted. They came back, they offered it, and they got it. But it comes down to the fact is we know that the release clause was active until I think it was the 18th of August. We knew that release clause was 68 million, yet we're pissing around, putting in 50 million, 55 million, still being 12 to 13 million off the overall value that the club are looking for. And we could have had that deal done. Instead, we've spent over 1.5 weeks trying to negotiate a lower term and probably really crap repayments on that agreement as well. And Arsenal have came in and went, we'll give you that, we'll give you that, we'll give you that. Yep, no problem, we'll take it. And you wouldn't put it past Parish to go out there, because as a chairman, it's his job to look after his club and make as much money on a player if they're selling them as possible. Absolutely. I'm certainly not slating him. We would expect, and we've seen Levy do exactly the same when other players are being sold to other clubs. But when we have our head of recruitment and all the rest of it away off on holiday for a whole week, then, and we see targets, number one targets, big targets, fall by the wayside or disappear, then you've got to question the mentality behind letting one of your main people who should be involved in those negotiations go away on holiday and us losing out on the players that we actually need. So what we've actually done now is we've backed ourselves into a corner. We have 6 days in the window with which to get our recruitment done. And not only that, clubs now know how desperate we are as a club to backfill the number 10, the winger, the centre half. So anytime you're walking in for those now, we're going to be expected to pay over the odds because we're desperate. So not a position that you want to be seeing it in. And if you look at the transfer window so far, it started out exceptionally well. We've signed Kudus, brilliant. Within 24 hours, we got to here we go on Gibbs White. We all know what happened with that one. That one went tits up in the background. We actually did go back and offer them even more money, an extra 8 million on top of the 60, turned away. And then it went dead. We had weeks of nothing. We've then jumped back up with the Paulinho loan deal with an option to buy, which is brilliant and working out exceptionally well. And if you look at any of the videos past that I've done throughout pre-season there, we've talked about Paulinho in terms of the numbers in his last season for Fulham, where he was just head and shoulders literally above all of the other competition around him in terms of tackles made. I think it was 300 and the next one was like 191 or something. So, it's just so much better. And what we've seen in Burnley, definitely the Man City game, we've seen what this guy actually does. So another signing, yes, we've got it right. But then we've rolled over that into the Eze deal, taking nearly 2 weeks to try and get that over the line and lose out. But that's then nearly 2 weeks of time negotiating with a contract and a club that was never going to go anywhere, that we've wasted time on potentially getting somebody who does want to come to the club. So we're leaving ourselves in a bit of a hole in terms of what we're going to do. As I said, these are all the names that I've seen come out over the last kind of 24, 48 hours. And the ones that we're talking about are probably likely to happen, maybe going to happen, and the outside chances that these are the ones that we'll maybe potentially end up bringing in instead. Who knows? We might end up seeing something or someone that we had absolutely no idea about. It's happened before. So I guess we've just got to sit and hold tight and hope against all hope that we have targets lined up, that we're having the conversations and we're making the appropriate bids to get them in and not just trying to steal a march in the price. At the end of the day, if the valuation is that this is a selling club's game, it's not a buying club. And Levy should know this because he's the guy that's done this so much in the past to other teams where he has gotten so much more for a player than we really should have done. So he should really be respecting that. If they're 180, then go in and say, oh, what about 75? At least bring yourself close to the mark where you can have that very quick and honest discussion in terms of, well, if you're not going to accept 75 now, well, where can we meet in the middle? Can we meet in the middle? But if we've got players that have release value clauses and the value is reasonable, then we just need to go in and hit it and get the player. But we'll just wait and see. As I say, 6 days left in the season. The kind of rumor mill has been saying that Lange, Levy, and Thomas Frank have been sitting down and discussing what are the number 10 options, what are the winger options, and what he would like if we can get a centre half in. And they're drawing up that target list. But again, as I say, 6 days left in the window doesn't leave an awful lot of time in then making contact with the clubs, the players' agents, and having all those people sit down and negotiating all of those agreements and the finer details in between in terms of buying and selling with the club, agreeing personal terms with the player, and then bringing all of that in and together, but doing that at least 2-3 times to bring in what we're needing to actually give us an opportunity to at least last till January when the window opens again and we can identify anything else that we might need to bring in. So that is the video. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know what your thoughts are on these players. Is there anyone else out there that could fit the mould in terms of what we need as a number 10, a winger, and a centre half option? I think one I put in at the end of my preview video for the game against City there, and not the preview video, the review video of the actual match, Nathan Ake, centre half, can play as a left back, has played on the left hand side of a centre back trio. So has the skill set, 30 years of age, Dutch international, not getting as much time for City after the signings that they have made. Be cheeky, go and sling them 25-30 million and see if we can get him. Still a very good player. And, at the end of the day, we're not needing someone who's absolutely amazing because they'll be expected to be playing every week. We just need someone that would be happy and comfortable rotating through the team and the squad and all the rest, and it would certainly give us a lot more backup options. But we'll wait and see what comes. As I say, there's not much conversation in terms of centre-back options that we have looked at or what we've been linked with, apart from the Hincapie one, which apparently isn't going anywhere. It's just being thrown out there probably to generate a bit of clickbait. So as I say, that is the video. Again, thank you very much for watching. Drop a like on it, share it, stick your comments down below. Check out some of my other videos that I've got up at the moment as well. And remember, subscribe to the channel so that you will be notified of everything else that I'm putting out over the course of the upcoming season. Cheers. Come on, you Spurs.